Chapter 3. Pavel Pavlovitch Trusotsky. The latter stood speechless, rooted to the spot. They stood facing one another in the doorway, and stared fixedly into each other's eyes. Some moments passed, and suddenly, Velchaninov recognized his visitor. At the same time, the visitor evidently realized that Velchaninov recognized him fully. There was a gleam in his eye that betrayed it. In one instant his whole face melted into a sugary smile. "I have the pleasure, I believe, of addressing Alexey Ivanovitch," he almost chanted, in a voice of deep feeling, ludicrously incongruous with the circumstances. "Surely you are not Pavel Pavlovitch Trusotsky?" Velchaninov brought out with an air of perplexity. "We were acquainted 9 years ago at tea. And if you will allow me to remind you, we were intimately acquainted." "Yes, to be sure, but now it's 3 o'clock, and for the last 10 minutes you've been trying whether my door was locked or not." "3 o'clock!" cried the visitor, taking out his watch and seeming positively grieved and surprised. "Why, so it is. 3! I beg your pardon, Alexey Ivanovitch. I ought to have considered before coming up. I'm quite ashamed. I'll come again and explain in a day or two, but now—" "No! If there's to be an explanation, will you kindly give it me this minute?" Velchaninov caught him up. "Please walk inside, into this room. No doubt you intended to come into the room yourself, and have not turned up in the middle of the night simply to try the lock." He was excited, and at the same time disconcerted, and felt that he could not grasp the position. He was even somewhat ashamed. There proved to be neither mystery nor danger. The whole phantasmagoria had proved to be nothing. All that had turned up was the foolish figure of some Pavel Pavlovitch. And yet he did not believe that it was all so simple. He had a vague presentiment and dread of something. Making his visitor sit down in an armchair, he seated himself impatiently on his bed, not a yard away, bent forward with his hands on his knees, and waited irritably for him to speak. He scanned him greedily, and remembered him. But, strange to say, the man was silent, quite silent, and seemed not to realize that he was, in duty bound, to speak at once. On the contrary, he, too, gazed at Velchaninov with a look of expectation. It was possible that he was simply timid, feeling at first a certain awkwardness, like a mouse in a trap. But Velchaninov flew into a rage. "What do you mean by it?" he cried. "You are not a phantom or a dream, I suppose? You've not come to play at being dead, surely? Explain yourself, my good man." The visitor fidgeted, smiled, and began warily. "So far as I see, what strikes you most of all is my coming at such an hour, and under such peculiar circumstances, so that, remembering all the past, and how we parted, it's really strange to me now. Though, indeed, I had no intention of calling, and it has only happened by accident." "How by accident? Why, I saw you through the window run across the street on tiptoe." "Ah, you saw me? So perhaps you know more about it all than I do. But I'm only irritating you. You see, I arrived here 3 weeks ago on business of my own. I am Pavel Pavlovitch Trusotsky, you know. You recognized me yourself. I am here to try to get transferred to another province, and to a post in another department, considerably superior. But all that's neither here nor there, though. The point is, if you must know, that I have been hanging about here for the last 3 weeks, and I seem to be spinning out my business on purpose. That is, the business of my transfer. And, really, if it comes off, I do believe I shan't notice that it has come off, and shall stay on in your Petersburg, feeling as I do now. I hang about as though I had lost sight of my object, and, as it were, pleased to have lost sight of it. Feeling as I do." "Feeling how?" Velchaninov asked, frowning. The visitor raised his eyes to him, lifted his hat, and pointed to the crepe on it. "Why, look. That's how I'm feeling." Velchaninov gazed blankly, first at the crepe, and then at the countenance of his visitor. Suddenly, the color rushed into his cheeks, and he grew terribly agitated. "Surely not Natalia Vasilievna?" "Yes, Natalia Vasilievna. Last March. Consumption, and almost suddenly, after 2 or 3 months' illness. And I am left, as you see." As he said this, the visitor, in deep emotion, put out his hands on each side, the hat with the crepe on it flapping in his left one, while he made a low bow that displayed his bald head for 10 seconds at least. His air and his gesture seemed to revive Velchaninov. An ironical and even provocative smile hovered on his lips, but only for a moment. The news of the death of this lady, whom he had known so long ago, and had long ago succeeded in forgetting, gave him a shock which was a complete surprise to him. "Is it possible?" he muttered the first words that came to his tongue. "And why didn't you come straight and tell me?" "I thank you for your sympathy. I see it and appreciate it, in spite of so many years of separation. You have just shown such sympathy for my sorrow, and even for me, that I am, of course, sensible of gratitude. That was all I wanted to express. It's not that I had doubts of my friends. I can find here the truest friends at once. Stepan Mikhailovich Bagatov, for instance. But you know, Alexey Ivanovitch, our acquaintance with you, friendship rather, as I gratefully recall it, was over 9 years ago. You never came back to us. There was no interchange of letters." The visitor chanted his phrases as though to music, but all the while that he was holding forth he looked at the floor, though, no doubt, all the time he saw everything. But Velchaninov had by now regained his composure. With a very strange impression, which grew stronger and stronger, he listened to Pavel Pavlovitch and watched him, and when the latter suddenly paused, the most incongruous and surprising ideas rushed in a sudden flash into his mind. "But how was it I didn't recognize you till now?" he cried, growing more animated. "Why, we've stumbled across each other 5 times in the street." "Yes, I remember that too. You were constantly crossing my path. Twice, or perhaps 3 times. "That is, you were constantly coming upon me, not I upon you." Velchaninov stood up, and suddenly, quite unexpectedly, he began laughing. Pavel Pavlovitch paused, looked at him attentively, but at once continued. "And as for your not recognizing me, you might well have forgotten me. And, besides, I've had smallpox, and it has left some traces on my face." "Smallpox? To be sure, he has had smallpox. However did you—" "Manage that? Anything may happen. One never can tell, Alexey Ivanovitch. One does have such misfortunes." "Only it's awfully funny all the same. But continue, my dear friend." "Though I met you, too—" "Stay. Why did you say, 'manage that,' just now? I meant to use a much more polite expression. But go on. For some reason, he felt more and more good-humored. The feeling of shock was completely effaced by other emotions. He walked up and down the room with rapid steps. "Even though I met you, and though when I set out for Petersburg I intended to seek you out, yet now, I repeat, I have been feeling so broken in spirit, and mentally shattered ever since March." "Oh yes, shattered since March. Stop a minute. Don't you smoke?" "As you know, in old days when Natalia Vasilievna was living, I—" To be sure. "And since March?" "Just a cigarette, perhaps." "Here is a cigarette. Light it, and go on." Go on, it's awfully—" And, lighting a cigar, Velchaninov quickly settled himself on the bed again. Pavel Pavlovitch paused. "But how excited you are yourself! Are you quite in good health?" "Oh, damn my health!" Velchaninov was suddenly exasperated. "Continue!" The visitor, for his part, looking at his companion's agitation, seemed better pleased, and grew more self-confident. "But what is there to continue?" he began again. "Imagine, Alexey Ivanovitch, in the first place, a man destroyed. That is, not simply destroyed, but fundamentally, so to say. A man whose existence is transformed after 20 years of married life, wandering about the streets with no consistent object, as though in a wilderness, almost in a state of oblivion, and finding a certain fascination in that oblivion. It is natural that sometimes, when I meet an acquaintance, even a real friend, I purposely go out of my way to avoid approaching him, at such a moment of oblivion, I mean. And at another moment one remembers everything so, and so longs to see anyone who has witnessed that recent past, gone now, never to return, and has taken part in it, and one's heart beats so violently that one is ready to risk throwing oneself upon a friend by night as well as by day, even though one might have to wake him up at 4 o'clock in the morning on purpose. I have made a mistake about the time only, not about our friendship. For this moment more than makes up for it. And as for the time, I really thought it was only 12, feeling as I do. One drinks the cup of one's sorrow till one is drunk with it. And it's not sorrow indeed, but the novelty of my state that crushes me. How strangely you express yourself, Velchaninov observed gloomily, becoming extremely grave again. Yes, I do express myself strangely. And you're not joking? Joking? Exclaimed Pavel Pavlovitch in pained surprise. And at the moment when I am announcing the sad— Ah, don't speak of that, I entreat you. Velchaninov got up and began pacing the room again. So passed 5 minutes. The visitor seemed about to get up too, but Velchaninov shouted, "Sit still! Sit still!" And Pavel Pavlovitch obediently sank back into his armchair at once. "But how you have changed, though," Velchaninov began again, suddenly stopping before him, as though all at once struck by the thought. "You're dreadfully changed. Extraordinarily. Quite a different person." "That's not strange. 9 years. No. It's not a question of years. It's incredible how you've changed in appearance. You've become a different man." "That too may well be, in 9 years. Or is it since March?" Pavel Pavlovitch sniggered slyly. "That's a funny idea of yours. But if I may venture, what is the change exactly?" "You ask what? The Pavel Pavlovitch I used to know was such a solid, decorous person. That Pavel Pavlovitch was such a clever chap. And now, this Pavel Pavlovitch is a regular vaurien." He was at that stage of irritability in which even reserved people say more than they ought. "Vaurien? You think so? And not a clever chap now? Not clever?" Pavel Pavlovitch chuckled with relish. "Clever chap be damned. Now I dare say you really are too clever." "I'm insolent, but this low fellow's more so, and what is his object?" Velchaninov was thinking all the while. "Ah, dearest, most precious friend!" cried the visitor suddenly, growing extremely agitated, and turning round in his chair. "What are we saying? We are not in the world now. We are not in the society of the great and the worldly. We are 2 old friends, very old friends, and we've come together in the fullest sincerity to recall to one another the priceless bond of friendship, of which the dear departed was the precious link." And he was so carried away by the ecstasy of his feeling that he bowed his head as before, hiding his face in his hat. Velchaninov watched him with aversion and uneasiness. "What if he's simply a buffoon?" flashed through his mind. "But no, I don't think he's drunk. He may be drunk, though. His face is red. Even if he were drunk, it comes to the same thing. What's he driving at? What does the low fellow want?" "Do you remember? Cried Pavel Pavlovitch, removing the hat a little, and seeming more and more carried away by his reminiscences. "Do you remember our expeditions into the country, our evenings and little parties with dancing and innocent games at the house of His Excellency, our most hospitable Semyon Semyonovitch, and how we used to read together, the three of us, in the evening, and our first acquaintance with you, when you called on me that morning to make inquiries about your business, and even began to speak rather warmly, and suddenly Natalia Vasilievna came in, and within 10 minutes you had become a real friend of the family, and so you were for a whole year, exactly as in Turgenev's play, A Provincial Lady." Velchaninov paced slowly up and down, looked at the floor, listened with impatience and repulsion, but listened intently. "The thought of a provincial lady never entered my head," he interrupted, somewhat confused. "And you never used to talk in such a shrill voice and such unnatural language. What is that for?" "I certainly used to be more silent. That is, I was more reserved," Pavel Pavlovitch interposed hurriedly. "You know I used to prefer listening while the dear departed talked. You remember how she used to talk? How wittily. And in regard to A Provincial Lady, and Stupendiev particularly, you are quite right, for I remember it was we ourselves, the precious departed and I, used to speak of that at quiet moments after you'd gone away, comparing our first meeting with that drama. For there really was a resemblance. About Stupendiev especially." "What Stupendiev? Damn him!" cried Velchaninov, and he actually stamped, utterly disconcerted at the mention of Stupendiev, owing to a disturbing recollection that was evoked by the name. "Stupendiev is a character in a play, the husband in A Provincial Lady," Pavel Pavlovitch piped in a voice of honeyed sweetness. "But it belonged to a different series of our precious and happy memories, when, after your departure, Stepan Mikhailovich Bagautov bestowed his friendship on us, exactly as you did, for 5 whole years." "Bagautov? What do you mean? What Bagautov?" Velchaninov stood still, as though petrified. "Bagautov, Stepan Mikhailovitch, who bestowed his friendship on us, a year after you, and exactly as you did." "Good heavens, yes, I know that!" cried Velchaninov, recovering himself at last. "Bagautov? Why, of course. He had a berth in your town." He had. At the governor's. From Petersburg. A very elegant young man, belonging to the best society," Pavel Pavlovitch exclaimed in a positive ecstasy. Yes. What was I thinking of? Why, he too, Pavel Pavlovitch repeated in the same ecstasy, catching up the word his companion had incautiously dropped. "He too! Well, we acted A Provincial Lady at His Excellency's, our most hospitable Semyon Semyonovitch's private theatre. Stepan Mikhailovitch was the Count, I was the husband, and the dear departed was the Provincial Lady. Only they took away the husband's part from me. Natalia Vasilievna insisted on it, so that I did not act the husband, because I was not fitted for the part." "How the devil could you be Stupendiev? You're preeminently Pavel Pavlovitch Trusotsky, and not Stupendiev," said Velchaninov, speaking with coarse rudeness, and almost trembling with irritation. Only excuse me. Bagautov's in Petersburg. I saw him myself in the spring. Why don't you go and see him too? I have been every blessed day for the last fortnight. I'm not admitted. He's ill. He can't see me. And, only fancy, I've found out from first-hand sources that he really is very dangerously ill. The friend of 6 years. Ah, Alexey Ivanovitch, I tell you, and I repeat it, that sometimes one's feelings are such that one longs to sink into the earth. Yes, really. At another moment, one feels as though one could embrace any one of those who have been, so to say, witnesses and participators of the past, and simply that one may weep, absolutely for nothing else but that one may weep. Well, anyway, I've had enough for you for today, haven't I? Velchaninov brought out abruptly. More than enough, more! Pavel Pavlovitch got up from his seat at once. It's 4 o'clock, and, what's worse, I have so selfishly upset you. Listen, I will be sure to come and see you myself, and then, I hope... Tell me straight out. Tell me frankly. You are not drunk today. Drunk? Not a bit of it. Hadn't you been drinking? Just before you came? Or earlier? Do you know, Alexey Ivanovitch, you're in a regular fever. I'll come and see you tomorrow morning, before 1 o'clock. And I've been noticing for a long time that you seem, as it were, delirious, Pavel Pavlovitch interrupted with zest, still harping on the same subject. I feel conscience-stricken, really, that by my awkwardness... But I'm going. And you lie down and get some sleep. Why, you haven't told me where you're living, Velchaninov called hastily after him. Didn't I tell you? At the Pokrovsky Hotel. What Pokrovsky Hotel? Why, close to the Pokrovsky Church, close by, in the side street. I've forgotten the name of the street, and I've forgotten the number. Only it's close by the Pokrovsky Church. I shall find it. You'll be very welcome. He was by now on his way downstairs. Stay! Velchaninov shouted after him again. You are not going to give me the slip? How do you mean, give you the slip? Cried Pavel Pavlovitch, staring at him open-eyed, and turning round to smile on the third step. Instead of answering, Velchaninov shut the door with a loud slam, carefully locked it, and fastened the hook. Returning to the room, he spat, as though he had been in contact with something unclean. After standing for some 5 minutes in the middle of the room, he flung himself on the bed without undressing, and in 1 minute fell asleep. The forgotten candle burnt itself out on the table.